welcome to 3 Seconds and Counting. What does that mean? It means that you have very little time to capture your audience's attention and keep them. So today we're going to talk about that in the context of plain language. I know you're all here because you've heard of plain language. You may have even had some earlier plain language training. If you're really lucky and you work for a federal agency, you may have participated in a plain language class offered by the Plain Language Action and Information Network, or maybe your agency hired someone at some point to come in and do some training. Or you may have just heard that you're required to write in plain language because of the law, and you really want to master that. So today I want to tell you a few things, and I'm going to leave you a changed person today. I promise. No, really. I know you're thinking, sure, right, a workshop is going to change me. But it really is, and here's why. Because the first time you have a plain language class, not only does it change how you act, but it changes how the people around you are writing and interacting also, because you're going to become hyper aware of a little thing called clarity. And that's what we're going to really focus on today, how to communicate clearly with your writing. So first I want to tell you, plain language is not a new thing. In fact, the big debate is how long plain language actually has existed. All of the movements worldwide for plain language in government began in the 70s. But we have a lot of evidence that all the greats called for plain language as far back as Abraham Lincoln. There have been executive orders in place for nearly 50 years. We've had 2 wars on gobbledygook, and coming all the way to the present time, we actually have a law in place. The Plain Writing Act of 2010 says that federal agencies are supposed to be communicating in plain language for all citizens and stakeholders. It prescribes certain types of documents that you're required to have in plain language. It's a really wide variety. So the Office of Management and Budgets rule for implementing that law, which came out in April of 2011. The law was signed in October of 2010. And OMB gave instructions to the federal government on how to follow that law in April of 2011, saying essentially all documents from the government should be in plain language. So here's the reality. Plain language is not just a thing that some law decided we had to do that would cause us more trouble. Plain language is absolutely critical to everything we do in government. And here's why. When I began teaching plain language in 2007, the statistics that we had available at that time from actual research said that you had between 8 and 11 seconds to get the attention of your reader and have any hope of keeping it. The most recent research that came out in 2018 now shows that thanks to social media, mobile phones in our hands, and all the other technology, we have approximately 3 to 5 seconds maximum to get and keep our readers' attention. It goes something like this, folks. We're in an attention economy. That means every possible business, source, organization, association, app, everything is constantly competing for our attention. And so if I'm a person out in the world reading a document, basically it comes down to this. If I can't scan it or skim it quickly and get the gist, if I don't understand it, it doesn't matter. If it's not relevant to me, if it's confusing, if it's hard to look at or hard to read, I'm out. I'm out. But we have to really remember, it's not just about us. Think about the line in the musical Hamilton, who lives, who dies, who tells your story? the story that gets told about what we do in our professional world is not necessarily from us. It's from our stakeholders, and most importantly, it's the media and it's the congressional staffers who have been assigned to read your answer to the congressman and write a 3-sentence summary, and they have to interpret that long document that you've just sent to the Hill. So it's very important that anybody who's going to read our documents, whether they are reports or whatever type of dispatch we're putting out, whether it's very important public health information or anything that people need to know, it's very important that they be able to read it and understand it quickly. And that brings us to just exactly what is plain language. Well, plain language is a term that just means a type of communication that the audience can understand the first time they read, or, for example, in the case of the Voice of America or those types of agencies, hear it. And that means they need to be able to find the information they're looking for and understand it. And they've got to be able to act on it. They've either got to be able to act on their needs or do what we as government are teaching them how to do or asking them to do. There are a lot of myths about plain language that we need to dispel before we really get into how you do plain language. The most important of which is this one, the last bullet here in red. Plain language does not mean dumbing down your content. I have to say that's the number one thing I hear in my own workplace and in all the classes that I teach. People are very worried about dumbing down their content. So let's break that down for just a moment. First of all, we live in a world where content is everywhere. Like we said, information is coming at us from every source. And we live in a world where there are certain expectations based on what kind of profession you're in, and that's a valid worry. But clarity does not mean reducing the integrity of the content or the information. So you're not stripping out the important information. You're not looking at grade level. That's another thing. I must get 2 or 3 emails a month asking me what grade level should we be going for in our Flesch-Kincaid score in Microsoft Word documents if we're trying to achieve plain language. It's not about a Flesch-Kincaid score, and it's not about grade level, never. What it's about is whether or not the target audience can understand clearly. And here's the really important thing you need to understand. Readers have questions. If they came to your document on a website, they came there looking for something to start with. Our job is to try and anticipate what it is that our readers are likely to be asking. And we have to figure out how we're going to answer those questions. The very most important question every reader has, though, and if you're really honest with yourself, you'll know, you do it too. The first question we have is this what I'm looking for? Is this what I need? So what? What's in it for me? If there's any question at all that's most likely to be asked in the first sentence is, what are you talking about? What? Do I care about this? But the really big one, the one that's most dangerous for us all when we're content creators is, really, how soon can I stop reading? How quickly can I get what I need and stop reading? So it's very important to know that plain language is really just about focusing on the reader's needs and organizing what you're putting out there for the reader. So today we're going to learn how we're going to organize our writing for the reader and how we're going to answer those questions. And the first thing here in red, always use an outline. If you are cringing at the thought because you're scarred from the outlines of days of yore in high school, I promise you, Roman numerals are not required. All you need is a handy dandy little sticky pad and a pen. You're just giving yourself a map to follow. It's overwhelming and terrifying to open up a blank Word document and sit there staring at it, knowing that now you've got to come through and fill out all of that whole big piece of white space. If you've given yourself a little 4-bullet map on a sticky pad, that's no longer necessary. In that case, all you're doing is remembering, here's the first thing I have to say, and the second thing I have to say, and the third thing I have to say. So I literally keep this beside my right hand with a pen so that before I start writing, while I'm figuring out what it is I'm supposed to do, I can give myself a little map. And I make sure I follow that, because I'll never end up in the ditch as long as I follow that little directional thing I've given myself. And I can go in and I can fix and I can create transitions, but I've got to make sure I know what I'm saying and in what order. And I have to determine who my reader is and what they need before I do that. So the first thing I have to remember, and I hope you will too, it's not about you. It's not about you as the content creator or the government agency or the whatever. It's always about the reader. And that means we have to let go of a few things. First of all, we've got to let go of the way we were trained to write in high school and college. Academic writing is based on an entirely different type of format than business writing, than clear writing, and for a purpose. Academic writing is structured for you to build a case and prove a point. But business writing, clear writing, is all about stating your point and then supporting it. That means you've got to let go of the need to impress. You've got to let go of that need to show how many degrees you've earned and how smart you are. You've got to let go of that constant fear of and need to impress your boss or do it the way he or she is expecting to see it. And this is the big one I run into all the time. I can't tell you how many classes I've taught where someone in the class said, but wait, if we write this way, it won't sound federal anymore. And I got to tell you, that's not such a bad thing. The other thing is, and we all deal with this no matter what level of government we work in, how do we get this through legal? Attorneys are famously criticized for the way they write. Once again, they were trained over a long process of 3 years of school to learn to do it that way for a specific purpose. The problem is that purpose is going through court proceedings, and that's not what we should be doing when we're writing content for our stakeholders and the public. But it's easy to get tripped up by that, and it's a worry we've all had. So at the beginning, my dear friend Lam told you that I'm a plain language consultant, and that's true. I'm also a federal employee. And I have been a federal employee for a long time. In fact, I've been working in the plain language field as a federal employee since 2005, and I've been teaching since 2007. And I've run into every single one of these problems in my own life. The other thing that we run into is the boss doesn't want plain language because he says it sounds too casual. And that's a very key point. We have to always be paying attention to tone, because whether we like it or not, we are in authoritative positions as workers in government, whether it's local, state, or federal. But plain language is not only not asking you to dumb things down, plain language is asking you to talk to your stakeholder, to your reader, in the best way for them. And the rule of thumb is plain language adopts a professionally conversational tone. You have to think of it in terms of Goldilocks. It's not too casual. It's not too stuffy and formal. The key is letting go of that need to sound smart. The need to sound smart will automatically make you start writing in a more bureaucratic way. Now, the tone, however, doesn't have anything to do with the message and message relevance, and that is the real foundation of all content creation, as we all know. We have to make the message relevant for the intended audience, and we have to make sure we respect the reader's time and get to the point quickly. Quickly. Remember, you only have 3 to 5 seconds to get to the point, get their attention, and hope that you can hold it. So let's talk about what that means. And in this next video that my wizards in the background are going to cue up for me, you are the person who has just been asked for directions. So I want you to put yourself in place of this person at the bus stop and think about this answer and how you would have done it. And then we're going to talk a little bit about that. So here we go. Relax in. This is fun, and I'll tell you more about it when I come back.
Excuse me, what time does the next C2 bus leave for the Democracy Shopping Center?
Well, hello. Back in 1992, the City Council realized that the Democracy Shopping Center was a real hub for the East Side. So the City Council, well, they decided to create some new bus routes to connect the local neighbors with the shopping center. So now there are 5 bus routes that go to the Democracy Shopping Center: the B1, the E5, the D3, the C2, and the R6. In 2000, we only had the B1, the E5, and the D3. And that was working well, but not incredibly convenient for the folks who worked late at the shopping center. So they pushed the city to add some more bus lines, and we got this route, the C2.
Wow, that's a lot of information. It might be historical, but it's not helpful. You wouldn't answer his question like that when you're talking. Then why would you do that while you're writing? If you want to write clearly, you need to first know what the main message is. Second, think about the needs of your reader. And third, organize your information in a logical way. Use the inverted pyramid. Lead with the information that your reader needs to know to take action. Every reader has one major question. Why should I read this? And you need to answer that first with the who, what, when, where, why, and how. Then include important information. Leave the background information for the end. Using the inverted pyramid keeps people from giving up and getting information elsewhere.
You know, I forgot to mention that some of these bus routes are really efficient and some of them require a little more planning.
Excuse me, do you know when the next C2 bus is coming?
Oh, the C2 only comes every hour during the day. The last one came about 15 minutes ago, so you're gonna have to wait a while for the next one.
Oh no, I need to be at the Democracy Shopping Center in 20 minutes.
Hey, why don't you try the EWI route? It's over there just across the street, right next to the pizza shop. It comes every 10 minutes on the dot.
Oh, that's great. Thanks so much.
People were taking the EWI route, which takes them clear across town, nowhere near the shopping center. So just a month ago, they changed it so the C2 comes every 20 minutes. So the next one should be here in about 5 minutes. Hey, where did he go?
When you don't answer your readers' questions, they're going to look for information elsewhere, and they might get the wrong information. If you're the expert, make sure that your reader hears the message loud and clear by putting the main message first.
So how did you like that? Wasn't that cute? Okay, let me tell you a little bit about that video. That's part of a series of videos done by the USCIS, and the young woman in the video who was the narrator is not only a great friend, but also a longtime colleague. She was the co-chair of the Plain Language Action and Information Network, which is charged in the law, the Plain Writing Act law, with helping train federal employees. So I've worked with her for a long time. We're going to see a couple of those today, primarily because they're open source and they're easy for you to find, and because they're packed full of really good information. So if you were imagining yourself today as the person giving the instructions, in the chat, go and tell me what you would have done differently. Really quick, everybody. Okay, so Amy, you're my friend today. Yes, I would have just given the time. When does the next bus come? Oh, well, it just left 15 minutes ago. It should be here in about 45 minutes. That'll be, what, 12:30. What is the difference here? This guy started out, he gave a long background. He started talking about all the conditions that existed around what happened in olden times. And then he gave us the helpful listing of all the bus routes that are available. And did that help the person looking for information? No, no. Oh, Eric G., I love you. Yes. Quick follow-up question to find out where the person was going. So you could say, you need this bus, it's coming at this time. So see, plain language is no different than what we would really do in real life with real people. We don't talk in bureaucratic language, and we don't give answers to people with long, drawn-out explanations. If we do, it's because of some other thing, or maybe it's grandma and she tends to rattle on. But most of us, nobody has time. All of us, even in our current state, dealing with pandemic and mostly working at home, we are in really, really, really busy lives with a lot happening. Now, I don't know about you, but my work life has actually become busier since I went to 100% telework. Now I have all of the all of the demands of family and pets and neighbors and the yard man coming, as well as all of my, you know what, Karen Edwards, you've made a great point. Let me share that with everybody. Karen says, in the age of COVID, people miss talking to other people, so they tend to ramble on and on. Absolutely true. Absolutely true. But let's think about that in terms of that pyramid that Catherine introduced us to in the video, and the 5 W's and H. So in general, when you've got to get to the point quickly, you follow something called the 5 W's, which is who, what, when, where, and the H, how. Who, what, when, where, and how did this all happen? Now, did anybody, if you did, either raise your hand or, throw something in the chat. Anybody here also come from or have any kind of relationship to or background in journalism? Anybody? So if you did, you learned that on the first day, whether you took Journalism 101 or whether you got involved with a particular newspaper or media outlet. Who, what, when, where, and how. You learned how quickly to get all the information anybody would need into the first paragraph, which could be no more than 2 very, very short sentences, and you were always shooting for 1. So in journalism, what we call plain language is just called daily business. Get the most important thing out there up front, really quick, state your point, support it, drill down to the least important information. So let's take a look at how that works in an actual document. My friends have in the chat put an exercise for you called, What Does the Reader Need to Know? So let's open that up. Okay, let's take a look at this. I must have read 4,000 documents in the past few weeks about how fast people read on screen. And there's a tremendous amount of research and none of it is conclusive. So I'm going to give you just a moment to skim through this. Notice that word skim. We're going to talk about skimming and scanning a lot today. And while you skim, let me clarify a couple of things. So I am a federal employee, but I'm not talking much about that, the actual agency today, because I don't represent the agency today or the network. Today I am strictly in my consulting role, but because I work with the Plain Language Network and I am a federal employee, this is really my life. I got involved in plain language shortly after I became a federal employee because I'm very, very passionate about clear communication. I really actually care that people can understand what we are producing as government agencies. There is a worldwide movement that presents plain language as a civil right. And all that may sound like it's a bit too far. If you think about it, people really do need to be able to understand what their government is saying to them. And I feel really strongly about it. So I've always wanted to do my part to help make that possible for everybody, the public, everybody. So hopefully you've had a moment now to quickly skim through these paragraphs. What is the most important thing here? Now, let me give you a little context. This is an answer from an agency back to Congress. Congress asked a question, and this is the answer back. And as I look through your comments, yes, AP style book. Yes, Mary Frances Lowe, you're my favorite today. You're exactly right. The most important thing to say here is all corrective actions have been completed. And why is that? And closed, yes, Alicia Marston, and closed. Why is that? Because Congress asked, hey, what is the status on all of this? Now, let's take a look at how long it took for the answer to actually come out. We've got 4 lines of type in the first paragraph that tell us nothing except what was asked and what position it appeared in the original letter. I propose to you that any congressman will know exactly what they asked, and we don't have to repeat it back to them. And then we tell them what deadline Congress gave us to get everything done. And then we tell them the bad news. We missed it. We didn't make the deadline, but we've done the work. It's all complete now. So how would we change this to get the most important information up front? You can chat or you can unmute and just sing out, Louise, and let me know what you think. What is the most important thing we should say first? Dear Congressman so-and-so. Yes, Rebecca, the review is complete. Thank you. Oh, that's funny, Kurtria. Thank you for your inquiry. Yes, you're right. Dear Congressman so-and-so, thank you for your inquiry. All corrective actions are completed. And then we start telling them the next most important thing and the next most important thing and the next most important thing. The big deal is we did what you asked, and we want you to know that right away. Okay, good. Anybody else have anything they want to add about this? What's the least important thing in this entire piece? Yes, you're right. Okay, we have a couple of people who are telling me, well, it's kind of a tie between all correspondence will be retained and that first sentence, references A through D. That's right. Which references were used? Yeah. Okay, you guys are my favorite class today. So what was the real key there in what we just did? The real key was, who were we writing for? This was not just something that was going to be posted as an informational piece on the website. This was an answer to Congress. And I'm going to submit to you that along with using an outline, no matter what you write, the most important part of plain language is your audience. Who am I writing for? I had a writing coach years ago who told me if I had writer's block, to immediately do this exercise, ask myself, who am I writing for, and start making a list. It'll always work, and it'll always get you past that feeling of hopelessness when you're staring down that big white field of space. Who am I writing for really means, who is this message for? Who am I targeting? And why is that important? It's important because in government agencies, I'm going to guesstimate 90 to 95% of everything we do is going to end up on a website at some point. We may also be charged with a very heavy load of internal communication, which means we've got to take that into consideration. But anything going on the website that's going to become public at any point means that anybody in the whole wide world can find anything on the World Wide Web. The question we have to ask ourselves, because plain language is not about dumbing down and writing for a mass market, the question we have to ask is, who are we targeting? Who is likely to be the audience that finds this if we put it on the website? Or who are we returning this letter to? Or who is going to need this information, which is most likely going to be mission critical information. Let's think in terms, and let's use this example throughout. Let's think in terms, if you're an agency that deals with public health in any way, anything you do is going to be of great interest, at least for the next little bit. And public health being what it is going to always be a subject of high interest. So there are always going to be a lot of people looking for information, and they're going to be landing on your agency's site. But you have no way of knowing whether those folks landing on your site are actually your target audience. Well, what we do know is, especially for specialized agencies with very narrow specific mission criteria, that the target audiences are seeking them out most of the time. And we know, of course, that we can control our audience when we do a direct delivery of the communication. Think about that congressional letter. So we can control what we're telling directly to Congress because we're sending a letter directly to Congress to answer questions. That control is no longer in your hands once a document's on the website. But you have certain people who are in target audiences. So the goal is to focus on that target audience and think of your audience as a continuum, as a spectrum. So you have people who are very far from target on one end, and all of the people in the middle who are the targets. And then you have the people on the other end who are far. One end could be students, could be people in foreign countries, could be anything. The other end could be people who are stakeholders of another type, but not necessarily your target audience. Here's an example. Perhaps you work in an agency that's very technical, and your target audience is technical professionals in the IT industry who work directly with government. But on this end of the spectrum, you have a tremendous number of private sector companies that are technical, that are constantly looking at what's happening with certain agencies. So you've got about 5% on this end and about 5% on this end who are supra audiences. They have an interest in your content, but they're not necessarily your target audience. So what do you do with that? God, that is so confusing. I can't make sure everybody in the whole world can understand everything, can I? Well, actually you can, and here's how. You're going to focus on your target audience. We're going to call them the 90%. They're the people in the middle of your spectrum. We're going to focus on their needs, and we're going to talk to them the way they understand the topic. But We're not going to forget our 10%, our 5% groups on either end. We're going to take their needs into account and make sure that they can understand as much as they can. And by doing that, we're going to think about the level of expertise of our target audience. But that doesn't mean we have a license to write in a bunch of bureaucratic jargon because they understand us, because they're like us. It means we have to be clear still. Technical experts also need to read very clear information and also want it to be clear, okay? And we want to make sure we're giving the user what they need from the document. That means we need to have a great understanding of what our audience knows, and we also have to have a great understanding of what they need to know. Ultimately, it comes down to this. Plain language means we're getting rid of all the extras. Now, what I do in my role as a federal employee is I literally edit miles and miles of government documents every week for a particular type of agency that produces a lot of content. And most of the work I do is spent getting rid of all the extra words that are not adding any meaning and not doing any work helping to get my point across in these documents. I take out all the qualifiers that are so vague, many, several, very. Those types of words will never give you much weight in your document, and they'll always lead you into a path of adding more and more words to justify what many or much or several means. And then I constantly am looking for ways to use simple, clear words to build simple, clear sentences, which will lead to simple, clear paragraphs. And we're going to spend a little time on that today, even though we only have a couple of hours together and we have a tremendous amount of work to do and stuff to learn. We're going to look at the single most important thing that will instantly get you into plain language quickly in this next exercise. So I'm going to ask my friends to cue up the simple words exercise. Okay, so let's take a look at our left-hand two columns that have the white background under the heading Eliminate the Clutter. So without giving anything away, I've worked for 4 federal agencies, and every single thing in this exercise are things that I have personally edited out of particular documents in my day. And you'll be surprised at how fast you can improve what's happening in your writing by simply becoming aware of these and changing them. So yes, we have a number of questions about can we get a printout? What's going to happen is we're going to do this exercise together. When we finish the exercise before we end up today, I am going to ask them to slip in a copy of this for you. Right now you have the blank exercise in your chat. Please feel free to pull that out onto your desktop and you can type in some of the answers yourself. Before the end of the day today, I'm going to give you the whole thing filled out if that helps you participate more while we do the exercise together. So you're going to have both. You're going to have the blank and you're going to have the finished version by the time we finish the class. And I have a question here I'd like to address from Tegan. Is what the audience thinks they want always the same as what they need? I expect not. How do you align that? That is a fantastic question. While we're getting ready for our exercise, let me answer that. Unless we all have crystal balls, and we don't, otherwise we would not be in the world situation we're in now. Unless you have a crystal ball or you can somehow foretell the future, you can never know exactly what any audience thinks they want. But you are in a unique position to determine about need. And need is kind of driven by your mission need of what your message should be, and then matching up that with who the audience is. And then you'll be able to figure out basically what they need. This is more about being able to communicate what you need to communicate in a way that anybody in that audience who needs it will understand it. So I hope that helps. And I hope that helps with how you align it. You're coming from the perspective of, I have a message for stakeholder A. Stakeholder A is, and then what are all their characteristics? Remember that list? You're sitting there with that blank Word document open. Who am I writing for? Who am I writing for? If I can make a list of 4 potential audiences, starting with my main target audience and all the sub audiences, I can also figure out what they know. Mostly, I can't get into everybody's head, but if my target audience is IT security experts, I know basically what they know about IT security is pretty deep. But I also know that they may not know something important about what's happening in this regulation or whatever. My job is to make sure that I give them an answer based on what my message needs to be in a way that they can understand, that takes into account the needs of the sub-audiences, which is what we're going to talk about more as we do this exercise. So feel free to chat, Storm. I also invite you to come off mute and come on camera so I can see your faces and be talking to actual humans. And let's talk about what these phrases should have been instead. I'm going to go down and you guys type as fast as you can. What is a better, clearer version of until such time as? Anybody? Yes, great, until. Now, why did we have to say 4 words for one? Let's try with the exception of. With the exception of. Yes, except. It would appear that. Great, it appears. A great number of. Oh, you can go a lot of ways with this one. You could say, wonderful, yes, a lot. Or we could say, numerous. But let's think, does everybody in that target audience understand the word numerous? That's a word choice idea we're going to have to roll around with. All right, in order to, this is my favorite one, and this is the one that I find that more and more people have begun to adopt in their speech, probably because we see it in social media a lot. In order to, 3 words to mean, that's right, 3 words to mean just 2. Now, remember I told you at the beginning that at the end of this class today, you're going to be changed. Here's what I can promise you. You're going to see these phrases in your world in a different way starting this afternoon. Every time you see in order to, you're going to suddenly go, you're going to cringe because you're going to be aware in a new way, different than you have been before, that we're throwing in excess words that have no meaning. How about this one? Arrive at an approximation. Arrive at an approximation. Fantastic. Yes, someone says approximate. What's another one? Anybody? How about guess? How about guess? Now, that's one where we may be bumping up against that line of the boss is not going to like that. It sounds too informal. So what would we choose instead? If we took a guess is too informal, what is better than arrive at an approximation? Estimate, excellent. Yes, you could be estimating. Again, we'd have to think about our target audience to figure out whether or not that would be a word that would work for that audience. How about this one? At this point in time. At this point in time. You guys are so fast today. Yes, at this point in time. Now. Now, think about that for a moment. Why do we use these long, wordy phrases to say simple one-syllable things that are easily understood by every audience that understands our language? This is particularly important if you work with or serve stakeholders that are not native English speakers. Being able to say things in a way that is clear and easy to understand is incredibly important for people who are not native speakers of English, and it's incredibly important for people who may be dropping into your content for some need they didn't understand that they had. Okay, despite the fact that, yes, despite, due to the fact that, okay, there we go, due to. Okay, so let's talk about due to. This is a real crutch for federal folks especially, and I've worked with a number of local government folks in the past year who really love this particular form, due to, and that means what? That's right, it means because. So in this list, you'll see that there are about a half a dozen different wordy, cluttery phrases that just simply mean because. Because. Now, due to is a problem. Why is that? Anybody got a guess? And do feel free to unmute if you just want to sing out. Why is due to a problem? Excellent, yes. Due to is a problem because due to, meaning because of this, because of that, is exactly the same sounding two words as the check is due to Jack. Due to can be very confusing. Another structure that's very confusing is using the word as, to mean because. Blah, 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 as this is the case. Incredibly confusing because as indicates two things that are happening in a similar time frame. And although we may appreciate it because we learned that academic form when we were in high school and college, and maybe in our graduate program, it can be incredibly confusing. It's something that you'll also see more and more often, and you're going to be very, very aware of it from this point forward. Here's another way that we add 4 or 5 words when we could say one, and it is a chronic problem throughout government communication. For the purpose of, for the purpose of. What's another way to say that? Anybody? Okay, great. Yes, just for. That's so simple, just for. We use a lot of extra words to say for, because, now. Things that should be simple and very intuitive, we make not simple and not intuitive. So let's switch over to the right side of our columns here to simpler words. Let's talk about that, and then we're going to take a little break and come back and work on some other technique things. And we're going to give you the full key so you can see all of these. And I'm going to go through them pretty fast. So let's do what we did at the beginning on the left side of this chart. And you guys just chat storm me, you know, publicly or privately, or unmute and sing out. These are words that I literally see every day. And just this morning, I edited a public document intended for members of the public that literally said the timely promulgation of regulation. Timely promulgation of regulation. Anybody have any idea what that means? I will send you a lollipop in the mail if you can quickly type in what timely promulgation means. And I want to bring your attention to that word timely, which is another government crutch. I don't know why. It was one of the things that surprised me when I came into government, these many decades ago. Why does everybody use this weird word timely? Until that point, I'd never heard anything except in a timely fashion or in a timely manner, meaning on time, by the deadline, when they were supposed to. But somehow it has become an adjective being used as an adverb and vice versa in government. And its opposite, or its inverse that people use frequently, that I see everywhere these days, is untimely, being used to mean late. But I want to caution you guys, no. First of all, timely should not be used as an adverb standing on its own ever. And you're going to remember this: late tonight. Untimely does not mean late. Untimely means, yeah, you're right. Untimely means early. It's a crutch that somebody taught somebody in an agency decades ago, and somehow it has spread like wildfire. Please avoid timely and untimely. Instead, say by the deadline, on time, when it's due, submit it by the due date. Anything that will get you out of that timely, untimely knot that you get tied up in. So looks like everyone's ready now. Let's go through here and quickly talk about the simpler words. You should always be looking for the simplest, clearest word. And if you immediately get these words out of your vocabulary, it will change your writing and get you 80% of the way to plain language instantly. Even before we start talking about other techniques and sentences and paragraphs. Changing your words from the stylized bureaucratic language that you've become used to or have been forced to use will instantly make your writing better. So here we go. Obtain, yes, get. Request, ask. Utilize, let's talk about utilize. This is my favorite word to hate in all of federal writing. I've only seen the word utilized used correctly in a federal document one time in nearly 16 years. And I am really not exaggerating. Utilize does not mean the same thing as use all the time. Utilize means to take something intended for one purpose and use it for another purpose. So when I'm teaching live in a classroom, I wish I had one nearby here. I'll use this instead, my handy dandy water bottle. When I'm teaching in a classroom, I pick up the nearest broom and I poke the ceiling tile and explain that I am utilizing the broomstick to get the spider, to kill the spider or whatever. I'm using that object intended for one purpose for another reason. Why do we say utilize all the time in corporate and government writing? Well, I've been studying this for more than a decade now. I've been teaching since 2007, and I've been in an intense study of plain language since 2012. Here's the best I can figure out. somehow we equate the number of syllables of a word with the importance of the word, and therefore long words are better. That's somehow the logic, but it's really not true. Remember, you only have 3 seconds. You've got 3 seconds. You've got to, and if you can get them to stay with you 3 seconds, you've got to keep them. You've got to keep them. That means you've got to choose the simplest, clearest word that your audience can understand. And remember, you got 5% on this end and 5% on this end of your spectrum. And they also want to understand. And you're trying to meet their needs for them to be able to understand as much as possible whether or not the document was intended for them. So from now on, every time you see utilize, unless you can prove in your own heart to your own satisfaction that in fact something intended for one purpose is being put to use for another, change it to use. Always go with use. Here are 2 more. These are also my top 10 favorite. Concerning and regarding. That's right, about. Why don't we just say about? Here's another one. This is my favorite one that I love to hate more than any other, and it probably causes me more trouble than any other in the workplace. Implement. What does implement mean? You know, we really don't have time, so I'm going to go ahead and tell you. Implement can mean just about anything you want it to, but it apparently sounds very fancy and very formal. And so we implement a program instead of starting a program. We implement controls instead of putting controls in place. We implement and we provide all over the government, don't we? Yeah, we do. We have certain crutches that have become almost identifiable as government communication from the beginning. Here are a couple more that I'm going to ask you to really become aware of. And thank you guys for scrolling. Let's go down, see promulgate, parameters, and whether the next one, mitigate and facilitate. Oh boy, along with implementing and providing, we are facilitating all over the place. What does facilitate mean? Well, in the context of our work in government, it could mean a number of things, couldn't it? Facilitate may mean you're leading, it may mean you're helping, it may mean you're setting something up, it may mean you're bridging, it may mean you're acting as a liaison. It may, see, there are almost always 5, 6, 7, 8 new choices that are better than these stylized bureaucratic words. Mitigate, here's another one, mitigate. I did some research and I found out mitigate actually came from the engineering industry in the 1950s. Mitigate. And somehow it crossed over into corporate speak, and from corporate speak it made the jump to government and spread. Now, mitigate basically means to reduce a threat or to lessen a problem. So why don't we talk about reducing the risk of a program instead of saying mitigating? Now, reduce may not be the clearest option, but it's certainly clearer and more likely to be understood by your target audience as well as the sub-audiences than mitigate. Skip on down beyond mitigate to deploy. Deploy is a military word that means to take troops from here and move them over here to accomplish a goal or a purpose. But in government, what do? We deploy a program, we deploy a system, we just deploy because it sounds fancy and governmental. And how did that happen? Yep, you are exactly right. That happened because so many former military men and women came into government as civilian government employees, and they brought their own jargon, their military jargon with them, and now it has spread, it has become a part of the stylized, very difficult to understand communications from government. Now, a couple down from there, Upon, upon. What's wrong with upon? Well, absolutely nothing. You are exactly right. Once upon a time, all of our most cherished childhood stories start that way. And do you know why? Because all of our most cherished childhood stories date back to the 12th and 13th centuries, when upon was the hot word to use. In fact, after the 17th century, upon became more and more an academic word. And that's how it has come down the centuries to us to be used in our business life. We learned upon as children. We used it as students in high school and college. And now good old-fashioned on is no longer good enough. And I used to teach that we should never use upon and that it was never appropriate for our world. But I had a great experience a few months ago in a class that I was teaching, and it's always the students that teach me the most long-lasting lessons. A student said, you know what, I work for the FAA, and we use the word upon all the time because we communicate with the folks who are actually on the ground in the airport, and we always say upon arrival, and all of the air points, the signs talk about what's going to happen upon arrival. And I said, you know what, you're exactly right. That is the first and only use of upon that I would say is really appropriate in our government work these days. I'm sure there are more, and I invite you to contact me and let me know about those over time. In the meantime, unless you are calling the air traffic control tower as a member of the FAA, I'm going to encourage you to avoid upon unless you're writing stories for young people, and just go with good old-fashioned on. Let's go down to interface. Interface under upon. Yes, that's right. Great point. Interface is a word that comes from a number of industries. The one we're probably most used to right now, not sewing and textiles, is IT. In IT, for example, the screens that we're looking at right now are the interfaces. So how did interface come to mean having a meeting with somebody? Having a meeting with somebody. Has your boss ever said, I'm going to go interface with somebody in the hallway? It absolutely puts me over the moon when that happens. It's unbelievable. That's an example of corporate language coming into government. Here's one that's tough for all of us in government. Procure. Yes, it means buy. Excellent. Procure just means to buy, or the other word, anybody? Great, yes, purchase, buy or purchase. And we used to teach that you should avoid procure because it has another less savory meaning that could be extremely confusing for people, in particular folks who do not speak English as their native language. But after about 2,000 classes with federal employees over the past 14 years, I have been well schooled that that may not be completely possible because we have an entire arm of government that does nothing but procurement. I did a class that had about 80% contracting officers in it a couple of years ago. And procure is their vocabulary. So the challenge for them is, how do they then change that for public documents? And they went to great lengths to explain to me that in general, they are not ever working with the public, and their audiences are primarily internal. But they forgot all of the people who are out there reading the bids and trying to get the business with the government. So whenever you can, please use the simpler, clearer word like procure. Last but not least, and then I'm going to let you guys take a break, let's take a look at nevertheless, hence, henceforth, thus, therefore, thereby, all of those words Oh my gracious, once again, these are words that date back to the 15th century. And they're not really words that we use at all outside of the academic context anymore. I know I said therefore to you a few minutes ago because I was explaining this is how the argument goes and the thought processes. But I can tell you for sure, I never actually use thereby, hence, henceforth. I may occasionally say nevertheless when I'm trying to sound fancy. By the way, what does nevertheless mean? Anybody? Okay, so we have a couple of people who have taken guesses and they're not quite there. Anybody else? Well, there you go. Excellent. Again, you guys are my favorite class today. Nevertheless just means however. However, and that's a form that while it may have a lot of syllables and be unusual, it's one that we're more familiar with. So, thus, therefore, thereby, hence, henceforth, wherefore. I edited out a wherefore this morning and a whereby. A whereby. What does whereby mean? But, that's right. Get rid of all that extraneous academia out of your writing. People don't understand it. I've even had classes full of college professors, and when I started asking them what the simple meaning of these words were, some of them were actually stumped. So I'm going to challenge you. We're going to give you this sheet with all the, the quote-unquote answers on it. Study this and begin to watch for these words and these phrases. Along with your little sticky pad for your outlines for everything that you write, keep this taped up somewhere or close by on your desk and take a look at it every now and again and remind yourself that there's always a simpler, easier way, and it will be more understandable for your stakeholders, for your target audience, as well as the 10% whose needs you're taking into account. So we just looked at this list of words and cluttery phrases, and I have a number of questions from folks. I want to let you know we saw your questions. I'm definitely going to answer those. I didn't answer all those questions during the break because some of them are such great, important questions. I want to make sure everybody has a chance to hear what my answer is and think that through and maybe interact a little bit. Let's talk about these cluttered phrases. What exactly happens here when we start turning strong verbs into weak nouns? That process is called smothering or hiding, or here's a great word for you, nominalizing the verb, turning it into a noun. And that's a little bit of grammar jargon for you. And what happens when we do that is we take a strong, powerful verb, we cloak it in a bunch of extra words, and we turn it into a relatively weak noun phrase. Now, someone asked a question about what to do when you want to write with a little bit more umph and verve. And here is the answer. Go through and find every place that a power verb or any verb has been hidden by a bunch of extra words. So conduct an analysis. Conduct an analysis. What does that really mean? Anybody? Yep, there you go. It just means analyze. But why did we have to conduct and turn analyze into a noun? Okay. Present a report. Could be present, that's right. Could be report. Do an assessment. Yes, assess. Assess. And what does assess really mean? Let's think of that word. Who really knows what assess means? It means we are going to examine, we're going to look at it, we're going to figure out what's wrong. Yes, we're going to try to understand. Provide assistance. Provide assistance. I work for an agency that is providing assistance all over the place, all over the country, right now, today. And every day I keep trying to tell them, no, we're just helping. That's right, we're helping. Now, a number of people said assist, and that's a great option too, but which one is the simplest and clearest and more likely to be understood by all audiences, target and sub-audiences? Yep, that's right, help. And what's the last one? This is my favorite one because this is what we were taught to do in our academic world, in our education and training, is we were taught to end our artificially assigned 20-page term papers at the end of every semester with "and now in conclusion," or "to come to the conclusion." What are we really doing? Yep, we're determining, we're ending, we're finishing, we're explaining, we're summarizing. There are a number of ways we could say that using a strong verb and not hiding it with a bunch of different words that turn it into a weak now. So now that we've done this exercise, and you know, the light bulbs in your head are bound to be blinking. I even just had a little moment there. Let's do this. Here's your challenge for today. No matter what ends up happening technologically between now and the end of our workshop, I invite you to challenge yourself and take that list that we just worked on and do a personal inventory. I always tell all my students when I'm teaching the dirty, dirty truth that I don't like to talk about. Everybody has a default. I don't know how it happens. Maybe it happens in elementary school, maybe later than that, maybe high school or college. Maybe it happens on our first job when we have a particularly powerful supervisor who forces us to do things a certain way. But one thing, two things, three things, maybe a half a dozen things on that list have become your default. My default, I even hate admitting it, but it's really true. My default is prior to and subsequently, which just means before and after. I have to, even because somehow it's wired in my brain and it's part of my neurology now, and my eyes can skip right over it. So to make sure I don't miss an errant prior or a ridiculous subsequent dropped in somewhere, I actually go and run a little search and replace on my documents to make sure that I say before and after instead of prior to and subsequently. I don't know how that got wired into me, but it's there. And because I'm aware of it, because of this list, I know I need to check behind myself. So do that dictionary inventory and think about what your crutch phrases are and the phrases that you're most likely to use in a pressure situation. If you're under pressure or in a hurry, which bureaucratic phrases or creeping clutter is going to land in your document? So let's take a look now at technique, because we only have a little bit more time together and I want you to have lots and lots of question time before the end. So once we are aware of the short, simple words, we want to use those to build them into simple, clear sentences. Remember, we talked about that method of building in plain language. We're going to start with our simple, clear words. The basics of communicating is the vocabulary. And then we're going to use that to create simple, clear sentences. What is a simple, clear sentence? The first question everybody always asks me is, well, short, right? And the answer is, well, yeah, mostly. Plain language does not always mean short. The one thing plain language always means is clear and easy to understand by the target audience and the sub-audiences, taking into account the needs of the sub-audience. So plain language means clarity, and clarity is often, not always, 95% of the time, often a function of conciseness and short. Okay, so we're going to talk about short, but we're also going to talk about this other thing, which is how our brains understand a sentence. So the first thing is, let's look at our third bullet. Short generally means having a rule of thumb because, you know, every rule can be broken. And as we were discussing during the break, we're talking about communicating. It's all subjective. All of the hard and fast rules turn out to be not as hard and not as fast in reality. We have to communicate it in a way that's best for the person or group of people receiving our communication all the time. And so we use rules of thumb to give us guidelines. Guidelines. Plain language ninjas are not going to drop out of the sentence, out of the ceiling if you have a 34-word sentence, okay? It does happen. We try to avoid it. You want to stick to 20 words or fewer if possible. But remember, there's a thing that's happening in the brain, translation of all the words. So if we keep the sentences short, we can avoid what happens in bullets 1 and 2, treating more than one subject in the sentence, and complexity and confusion. Now, again, this morning I knew I was going to be stopping work early to be with you guys today, and so I started work very early this morning at about 6 a.m., and my first half hour on the job, I cleared out 4 of the most confusing sentences I've seen in quite a long time. And what made them confusing? The writers, the content creators, backed in to important sentences because they really didn't know what to do to transition between paragraphs. So backing into a sentence means that you have a really long clause that opens into the sentence, but it would normally be the predicate, the end of the sentence, but somehow we decided it would work better by being at the beginning. It goes something like this. Of all the loans that were processed on such and such a day in such and such a center, comma, we found 33 of them were incorrect. So I've now had to wade through this big prepositional phrase at the beginning of the sentence to get all the way to the meat. And that causes more confusion and will often cause you to have to do a lot of work in the sentence to clear it out and clean it up. At the minimum, you're going to have to flip the subject of the sentence and the predicate and take out some words to make it smooth. And then you're going to have to figure out, is this sentence too long? There used to be a rule, many of us were taught, that you knew the sentence was the right length if you could say the whole sentence in one breath. And I used to teach, nope, that's not a good rule. I've changed that though, because I've discovered for some people that is a really good rule. If you're one of the people who can say a sentence on one breath, a sentence of 20 words, what will often happen is as you say it out loud on that one breath, your ear and your neurology will automatically pick up what's clunky or wrong in that sentence. So in that case, that particular technique brings in other modes of understanding that will help you as the content creator. So if you're not sure and doing the actual word count is too much, then do that old-fashioned thing we were taught as kids. Take a nice breath, not a crazy deep breath, but a full breath, and say the sentence completely out loud until all the air in your lungs has exhausted. And you'll know whether or not that sentence has started to roll on. Also, remember, a run-on sentence is not necessarily just a long sentence. I have people come to me all the time and say, do something about this, full of run-on sentences. And I don't find a single run-on sentence. I find a lot of sentences that are too long, but a run-on sentence means two independent clauses that have been put together with no conjunction and no appropriate punctuation. Calling something a run-on sentence just because it's long kind of misses the point a little bit. A long sentence, too many long sentence means complexity and confusion. And plain language is first and foremost about reducing both, getting rid of complexity and confusion. So now, paragraphs. We've used our simple, clear words, and we've written nice, simple, clear sentences. And now we're going to build paragraphs. On my first week on the job, I got called out in a meeting because a particular manager really gets very upset about single sentence paragraphs. Now, having come from the journalism world, I just had to sort of lift my eyebrows and wait for it to be over. Single sentence paragraphs are just fine, folks. They're only not fine if somebody who's a boss has got an issue about it. Because if you are a native speaker of English and you were in the school system, public or private, in the United States, most likely you were taught beginning in 3rd grade that it's not a paragraph if it doesn't have 2 or more sentences. And you were taught that because that's the way we have to help kids understand the structure of their language and help them begin to learn to write at all, okay? The issue with paragraphs is not how many sentences you have. The issue with paragraphs is that if you end up with too many sentences in a paragraph, you almost always can be assured you have strayed into more than one topic. And that's where we also get stuck because we were taught that everything related goes into the same paragraph, but it's not true. And in today's world, especially with social media and the internet, one thing we know for sure is if we open something up, whether it's a Twitter post or a document, and there's just a huge wall of lines of type, we're not going far with that particular piece of communication. These days, I invite all of my students to think first and foremost about their personal habits of reading. Think about how you read, not how you read at work when you're being instructed to do a certain thing. Think about how you read and understand things. Too many long paragraphs and you're out. Anything that looks too difficult to figure out where the answer that you need is, and you're gone. So your paragraphs have got to be short, quick, and to the point, and you can do that easily by making sure you limit each paragraph only to one topic or one step of things you're telling people to do. The other incredibly important thing is you cannot have too many headers or subheaders. It's very hard to reach a point where you have too many headers or subheaders. Headings and subheadings do an incredibly important thing for us. They add white space. And I want you to remember this phrase tonight when you're sipping your mojito. White space is my friend. White space is my friend. White space tells your eye where to go on the page. The more headings, subheadings, and graphics you can add in, the better off you are, and the more likely that you can keep your reader for that 3 to 5 seconds. Your rule of thumb down here in the last bullet is no more than 5 to 7 lines of type on a page. Think about that 8.5 by 11 Microsoft Word document and what a 6-sentence paragraph actually looks like on the page. Even if you add space between the lines, you're looking at 4 or 5 inches of type, and it's going to be too much and too overwhelming for anybody who's not being instructed to do so to go all the way through. Active voice, very important stuff, important stuff. I'm going to ask my friends to cue up your active voice video, and then we're going to talk about exactly what active voice means.
Introducing Passive Voice Hits. If you love being passive, this 20-disc set can be enjoyed by you. Included in this exclusive collection is Whitney Houston's classic, You Will Always Be Loved by Me. Eric Clapton's The Sheriff Was Shot by Me, but the deputy was not shot by me. And the late great Marvin Gaye's It Was Heard by Me Through the Grapevine. Order today.
Wow, those songs aren't so catchy in passive voice. What's passive voice, you ask? Well, passive voice is when the subject of your sentence appears after the verb or not at all. Passive voice is wordy and vague. It hides who or what is doing the action in your sentence. And it makes your readers work harder to identify the subject of your sentence. To encourage transparency, we should avoid using passive voice and instead use active voice. Active voice focuses on the subject, making it clear who is doing what. It leaves little room for interpretation. Let's compare two sentences. The passive voice sentence, the form must be completed electronically, is vague. Who should complete it? You? Your attorney? Only people named Bob? Hi, Bob. The active voice sentence, you must complete the form electronically, is clear and direct. You can substitute any subject and it's still clear. How about the applicant, homeowners, taxpayers? Active voice gives your reader a clear message, so when you are writing any type of document, avoid using passive voice. You can tell your colleagues you heard this tip through the grapevine.
I have to tell you guys, of the entire series of plain language videos that my colleague Catherine has ever done, that is my favorite one of all time. Sometimes I go around the house just humming to myself, the sheriff was not shot by me, just for fun. And I saw that a lot of you really enjoyed that too. And Amanda, I too would buy that album. So let's talk about active voice. Remember what we were saying about elementary school and how we started learning to write? Think back. What did your third grade teacher teach you? The basic form of a sentence is subject, verb, object. Subject, verb, object. And they taught us about prepositional phrases and what the object of the verb is. And there's a subject, noun, and there's a predicate. You remember all that very basic type of stuff. That's what you need to think back to when you're writing. Passive voice is distinguished from active voice by the position of the verb. The verb is the action word. And where the verb should fall to indicate the action is behind the doer of the action. Now, so we now have two subjects. We have the subject of the sentence, which is the first half of the sentence before the verb. And that might include a whole bunch of words, right? And then we have the subject of the action. The subject of the action is the noun that's doing the action. You see here we have Jack rode the bike to the store. Subject, verb, object. You're almost always 95% of the time in active voice when a subject does a verb action and then there is a predicate with particular objects, which may include phrases after that. But you want the subject of the action doing the action. That means the verb comes after the doer of the action. And that's the key. Voice is a word that just means, you got it, verb. Think of that V. Voice means verb. Again, a 16th century word that has come down to us from the ages in our grammar jargon. Voice means verb. Active verb means active action, right? Passive verb means exactly the opposite. Verbs in the passive almost always need another verb to help them out. And usually that verb is to be. So Jan examined, or the books were examined by. If we flip it and make it passive, now Jan, who is the doer of the action, comes after the verb, and we've had to add a preposition, the by, and we've had to add the past tense and the form of to be. So now we have were examined, and that is a past participle. We don't know who did the action of that until we get all the way to the end of the sentence. It's so easy to fix this. Whenever you find a sentence where the second half of the sentence goes on and on and on and ends up with the doer of the action, immediately flip it. Get the doer of the action in front of the verb. You'll start taking out all the extra words, and before you know it, you've got a good, concise, and most likely much shorter, solid active voice sentence. Now, voice means verb, verb means action, and that is different than tense. So don't confuse voice with tense. I run into this with writers all the time. Tense means when something happens, okay? Verb means the happening. Voice has to do with where the verb is. Tense has to do with when it happened. And here's where it gets a little tricky. Sorry. Let's go back to that. You can be in passive voice, but be in future tense. The beach cottage will be rented by Fred and his family for the summer, okay? It's going to happen in the future. Fred's going to be doing the action, but Fred's actually behind the verb at the end of the sentence. So don't let that confuse you. True story, in my first experience in the federal world, I had a situation where something came to me to edit, and I did what I could, but it was in really tough shape. And I had to go back to the content creators and say, I am just so sorry, but this is not ready to edit. I really need you to help me out here. The entire thing, every single sentence is in passive voice. Could you please, if you could just please put it in active voice, it would be easier for me to help you. And so it came back to me a week later, and the entire document was in past tense because the writers didn't understand the difference between tense and voice. Over the years, that's happened more than once. And so I want to make sure you understand that when something happens, usually has less to do with who or what is doing the action than anything else. So always look for ways to get into active voice. So we're going to start talking about jargon, and that's going to put us on the downhill slide to finishing up and really working on your questions. And let's talk about what jargon is first, and why it's important. You see on your screen that I'm talking about abbreviations and acronyms, and I'm going to give you a more formal technical definition of jargon in a moment, but let's talk about what it means in reality. Jargon basically is the language of what we do, okay? Jargon means how you talk in your subject matter, in your office, in your group, in your unit, in your agency, in your club, in your association, whatever. And in government, our most powerful form of jargon, right up there, sharing first place with those stylized, long, multi-syllable words, is ... abbreviations. And not just any abbreviations, the kind that involved strings of letters that come as the first letters of multiple words in a phrase or a title that we shorten or abbreviate by just using the letters. You've seen them 1,000 times, and we all call them acronyms. Now, again, I'm a grammar nerd, so that's not completely accurate. An acronym is actually just an abbreviation that can be used or spoken aloud as a word. Otherwise, it's called something else, a big long word. We don't need to worry about it. For the sake of today, instead of saying abbreviation 1,000 times and getting tongue-tied, we're going to talk about acronyms. But I want you to know there is a distinction, and I want you to be thinking in terms of what am I taking away from today. Hopefully you've got a couple of things you're taking with you by now, but this one is really, really the biggest and most important, along with keeping your outline, using the simpler words, cutting your sentences. The most important thing you can do to improve your writing right away is get rid of or greatly, greatly reduce all those abbreviations that are strings of letters. Now, I know while I'm talking, you're frantically reading. I do the same thing. I'm in a class. I've already read it before the teacher stops talking. And you see, I've given you some things here in red. This is really important because this particular piece is an example of the kinds of things we do in government that cause so much misunderstanding. First of all, please, I hope you have your fingers on the keyboard. FAA, anybody? Anybody know what FAA is? Oh, you're so sweet. No? Believe it or not, it does not mean Federal Aviation Administration. Nope, not here. IRC, not Internal Revenue Code. Nope, 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 nope. COLA. If you've been an adult for more than 5 minutes and had a job, you probably know that a COLA is something. That's right, it's a cost of living adjustment. But guess what? Not in this document, folks. None of those things are what you think they are in this document. In this document, FAA is not aviation. It's the Federal Alcohol Administration. IRC is not the Internal Revenue Code. In fact, they never defined it for us at all, so we don't really know. And COLA has nothing to do with cost of living. It's the Certificate of Label Approval. So what has happened here is, at this agency, acronyms have gone wrong. They've started using their internal language for their external documents. This is the way they talk in the office. They talk about the IRC and the FAA, and their COLA means something different. And somehow it never occurred to them that that would not be the same in the rest of the world. So here's my challenge to you. Look for every possible way to get rid of abbreviations or reduce the number. And whatever you do, never, never, never use the abbreviations that you use in the office in a document, and never make up new ones. That COLA is particularly difficult because there's something that happens in our brain when we begin to believe that something means a particular thing. It's very hard to change that neurology and not automatically interpret that particular thing the way we believe or for what we understood it to mean. So in your brain, when you see COLA, your brain will automatically interpret what it already knows that it has in storage. It will slow you down and cause great confusion to go back and figure it out. So again, follow rules of thumb. Get rid of them completely when you can. If you can't, keep it to only one abbreviation per sentence. Keep it to no more than 2 in a paragraph. And if you're dealing with a long form document, figure out how many different ways you can remove abbreviations and increase understanding. I have a little thing I do with my writers. I give them a prize when they turn in a document that only has one abbreviation. And you'd be shocked and amazed that sometimes a dollar store item will make somebody's month. I see you guys telling me that certain subject matter cannot exist without abbreviation. Here's my challenge to you. That might be true internally and in acquisition and procurement, like we talked about earlier. You know, yeah, I know, there are some where you just can't. There are others, as my good friend Eric G., I really want to meet you. You've been awesome today. Points out there are many acronyms or abbreviations that mean lots of things. When you're dealing with internal documents that have to do with a particular subject matter and you're trying to, you're welcome, and you're trying to explain stuff to people who already know it, remember audience, the foundation, most important thing, who am I writing for? If you're writing procurement documents for people who deal with procurement and you're using lots of procurement acronyms or abbreviation, great, okay? Is it clear? Because they still need it clear, but that audience will understand that. It does not equal the same thing when you're dealing with any other kind of audience that doesn't understand all of that. And I have rules in our internal style that help give my writers fencing to keep them in the right pasture. Here's one I encourage you to think about. And this is a rule that I had to live under for many, many years, and it worked really great. If you're not going to be using a particular phrase at least 5 times in 10 pages, spell it out every time or abbreviate it differently. 5 times in 10 pages. Never abbreviate something that's only going to be used once. Don't even put the brackets and the string of letters. And if something's only going to be used a couple or 2 or 3 times, don't abbreviate that. The reader's mind won't be able to understand or remember it, and it will impede their understanding. So if you're going to use abbreviations, please, please, please look for the root of the term. Earlier when we were talking about facilitate, someone, and I don't remember who, but thank you, pointed out that the root of facilitate is the French word facile, meaning easy. Absolutely right. Facilitating actually is supposed to mean making something easier. This is the same kind of deal. Look for the root of the phrase that you are either being told to or feel the need to abbreviate. Is it a system, an agency, a center? Is it a program? Here's a big one that I run into with my writers all the time, where they are talking about a particular law, right? But when they abbreviate the name of the law, which may have 10 words in it, as a string of letters or 6 or 8 letters, it's unbelievable how difficult that is to understand. So, and yes, I see from Amanda, this is what I was getting ready to say. It is a big trend right now for all new legislation to come off the hill, written and titled so that the abbreviation, so that the acronym will spell a word. Surely you've all heard of the CARES Act by now. And remember back in the early 2000s where this started? The Patriot Act. That was the first time that the name of a law was designed before the law was even written, so that the abbreviation would spell out a word and be easy to say. Nevertheless, the average member of your target group is not necessarily going to understand all of that. And so you may want to talk about the act or the law, the council, the group, the association, whatever. Look for the root of what that phrase is and abbreviate that way. Come on, I don't know why my slides are not advancing. But let's return back to why that's jargon. Jargon is our insider language. Look at number 2 here, okay? This is part of a dictionary. It's not the full dictionary definition, but obscure, I know, that's a word that should be on my list. That means not a common word, it's something that's hidden. Insider lingo. It's a language that we speak in our office. And here's the thing, I did a test one time. I did it for an entire year from class to class and in my own office. And I discovered that in only 2 episodes, 2 instances, did people outside of my group and my department actually understand our abbreviations. And these are people I worked with every day for multiple years. Your insider lingo is what marks you as part of a group, either as part of a work department or an association, or, for example, in my other life, in my real life, I belong to something called NAGC. I'm part of something called the SD. I'm part of something called the YU. But most likely, unless you're also part of those things, you don't really know what that means. It's a way for me to make sure that you know that I'm different than you. And if we use that as a weapon against people, we've really actually impeded their rights. People do have a right to understand what their government is saying. But that doesn't mean all jargon is bad, because number 1 is the good. The good is the necessary technical term, and that's where all of my subject matter experts get really upset, because they don't know how to say those necessary things in a way that is plain language and not abbreviated or not jargony. If there's no other way to say it, you have to do that. But you always follow up with an explanation of what it means. Here's an example of bad government jargon. This was in a public document. It explains how something was put together and explained in a report. This public document went to the Hill and was posted on the homepage of the particular agency, and it used these words: deliverables. By the way, that's the worst of the worst business jargon. Initial design parameters. Only math people and IT people really understand what a parameter is. By the way, does anybody know? You want to put it in the chat? Yes, Amanda. Yes, we're going to go and have coffee when we can see each other in real life, Amanda, because deliverables is one of the things that I ruthlessly root out of every document. Demonstration plant, does anybody know what that is? It's a specific thing if you're in that industry. And production technology. These are all things that nobody, not on the Hill, not anywhere else, unless you're in that engineering world, would really understand. Let's take a look at this one. Give you just a moment. Oh, I just love this. We have individualized and specific assistance, right? For the purpose of, there's one of your clutter phrases. Anything else you see in there? Significant resources. We want you to know we're putting something into this. What does all this mean though? And why? Why are we saying it this way? Look at all those words. Why aren't we just saying, we'll help employees find another job here or somewhere else, but we'll help you. Here's one that has been troubling for me for many, many years, and I've used it to teach for many, many years. I was actually hired to go work with the Social Security Administration several years ago to help them rewrite all of the pre-written boilerplate language to answer letters. So I was asked to look at all of their pre-written responses, because they have about 115 categories of questions that they receive 95 or 96% of all of their contacts from actual recipients of Social Security. Now think about who those people are. They're your parents, they're your grandparents, your aunts and uncles, they're your neighbors, they're the folks you go to worship with, they're the folks that your kids may go play with their kids or grandkids. All the people receiving Social Security are the most mixed type of group of readers, right? You're going to have people from the very highest level of education and understanding all the way down to the lowest. This was the answer to the very common question, what do? I didn't get my check. I called. They told me it was cashed. That is the most terrifying experience for any person who is completely dependent on that payment. This was the answer they got back. And part of what I was hired to do was rewrite these kinds of answers to help people understand what they were saying. Okay, so take a look at the jargon here. This is all banking language. Anybody here from a banking or regulatory agency? Jurisdiction, issuance, reclamation. If you work for the Office of the Comptroller, this may be your common language. You get it, but somebody's grandmother may not. Beneficiary. You know, I actually had somebody ask me in a class, what does beneficiary mean? And this was a person with a very high level education. Beneficiary, forgery determination, and my favorite one, presenting bank. It took me a long time, and normally, you know, in a classroom situation, I use this as a rewriting exercise for everyone. So let's take a look here. Here's a rewrite, and I'm not saying this is the only way. Plain language does not ever restrict you to just one way to communicate. Plain language is kind of the gasoline that drives the car to clarity. So in the chat, tell me, is this any clearer for you? Is this any clearer for you? Trying to explain, if your check was stolen, thank you all, if your check was stolen, this is what has to happen. We can't help you here at Social Security. You have to go to the Treasury Department. And I really wish, yes, Eric G., we're going to talk about that. I would break it into 2 paragraphs. I was limited by the size of the screen because this paragraph actually deals with more than one topic, doesn't it? Yes. Often I think I should just redo this exercise to say, if your check may have been stolen, you have to contact the Treasury Department. The Social Security Administration does not handle that. That would be even clearer. All right, so to go back to my good friend, yes. Now we have to think about not only the words we choose, the sentences we write, and the paragraphs we build. We have to also think about how easy is it to read this document. Here's the deal. Everything's got to be scannable. Now, a friend of mine said, why do you keep saying that? I don't understand it. You're not scanning anything. And I went, oh, that's right. In technology, scannable means we put it on a sheet of glass, we run a light over it, we record what's there. What I mean is skimmable, and I use this 4-finger method. When you're skimming something, it's very natural to use your forefinger to help your eyes move faster. And if you ever take a speed reading course, that's exactly what they'll teach you to do. So skim or scan, whichever word is best, everything, absolutely everything must be easy to scan or skim and get the point quickly. You got to be able to get the gist. Remember our mantra that we talked about a little while ago, white space is our friend. Headings, subheadings. And here's another question writers run into all the time. Do I have to say in the text what's in my table? Do I have to explain in the text what the image shows? And the answer is no. Your images and tables should support the text. That may not always be possible if you are dealing with 508 compliance, but that's my other class, so we're not going to go off on a tangent. And remember, you must always respect your reader's time. So if you waste time in the narrative repeating what they're looking at, they'll always zone out. And so now I'm going to ask my friends to pop in our last video, and we're going to close up our shop, and you're going to ask me questions until they turn off our Zoom class, and I'm going to help you.
Hello. Have you started writing a document and got stuck trying to write complex instructions to your readers? You find there are a lot of ifs and thens, and you need to address them all. It may take a couple of pages to completely spell out the directions. Sometimes, pages of text explaining what to do can overwhelm your readers, making them feel as if they are drowning in text. This is the perfect time for a table. No, not one of these tables. A table inside your document to clearly explain the ifs and thens to your readers. Tables help you save words and quickly get your instructions out to the reader. They make complex information extremely easy to understand. So the next time you have lots of ifs and thens to explain, think about creating a table. Your readers will thank you.
Okay. While the video was playing, I looked at a number of your comments, and once again, I just have to say, you guys are my favorite today. TV ads and internet ads are great examples of how white space tell your eye where to go. And bullet points and headers we're going to talk about in just a moment. Let's stick with tables for a second as we finish up here. We are very familiar with numeric tables, and I can't tell you how often it happens. It happens to me every week. Somebody has a problem with the table because it's causing a technological issue in making our documents compliant with the Rehabilitation Act 508, Section 508. And I understand that. I want you to just please put that on the side, table that for a moment as a separate technology issue. Text-based tables can do wonders for you. Text-based tables not only save words, they make it so easy to take that really complicated stuff, in particular instructions, and make it logical and easy. Why? Yeah, that's right, because you can use that forefinger and you can quickly skim it and get the gist. Take a look at this. Now, if you're like me, you get to about the fourth line that starts with reporting and you're like, what? And you definitely are like, what? By the time you get to the end. Also, remember, that's one sentence. One sentence, folks. It's not a run-on. It has punctuation and it has conjunctions, but my gracious, it should be illegal. That is too much for any brain to try and decode. But what if I do that technique that Catherine talked about in the video? If I use the if this condition, then that action form in a table, and here's what happens. If you send your form this way electronically, we have to have it on the 25th day of the month. And you can figure out when you have to mail it, back it out from there. If you're going to send it in by paper, snail mail, we have to have it even earlier, by the 15th of the month. Makes it much easier to understand. Doesn't mean it's going to be perfect for everyone, but it will be easier for most. Now, to go back to my friend's point about bullet lists and number lists, yes, 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 yes. There are two kinds of lists. One is called a stacked list. That's the bullet list. One's called a run-in list. Anything that starts, has a name that starts with run-in or run-on is not going to be a good thing. Just think about that. A run-in list is a list that's part of a paragraph. It goes something like this. Blah, de blah, 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 colon, space, space, one, parentheses mark, blah, 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 blah. And then either a comma or a semicolon, depending on whether it meets the rules of having internal punctuation. And then two, and then three, and now your sentence is a paragraph, right? And it's impossible to get through. Why? Because you can't put your forefinger to work and quickly skim it. Stacking the list makes it much better, and it gives you what? Yes, white space. It adds white space to make it easy to understand what you're looking at and read and actually interpret the information. Numbered lists are the same. Keep in mind the punctuation and the format for bullet list and numbered list is not set in stone. It's different according to whatever style your organization follows. And style is another class, I promise. Editorial style is what I'm talking about. That's the set of rules we follow for all of our products. And that's your answer to the person who asked, what else would you call a deliverable? You'd call it a product, you'd call it a service, you would call it the goods that we procured. That product is going to be needing a way for you to make it consistent with all the other products. And an editorial style does that. A number of agencies are still required by law to follow the government publishing office style. Other agencies are allowed to use other styles. Some use Associated Press, AP, some use Chicago. So find out whatever style your agency uses and get a copy of it, either electronically or in hard copy, and begin to read through it when you have a minute and a mojito and familiarize yourself with it. And maybe even go talk to the staff editors about what they use and how they are applying it to your stuff. Remember, just like with paragraphs, with your rule of thumb, 5 to 7 items lists, research shows us if your list gets too long, that your reader actually forgets what the list was about. This has actually happened to me. I have encountered situations where a list started on one page, went down the whole page, went down another page on the back side of the leaf, and halfway down a third page. I promise you, if you get past maybe a dozen items maximum, everybody will have forgotten what the list was. Research shows us that our brain can really keep hold of about 7 items, and that's it. However, occasionally we run into something where we don't have much of a choice. It's 3:24, we're coming into the home stretch here. Here is an actual excerpt from legislation. It's very important anti-discrimination legislation, but when we break it up from this long paragraph form, what do we have? We have a stacked bullet list, which is very easy now to skim, but alas, it's 10 items on the list instead of 7. Now, there's nothing you can do about that. That's okay. That's what's actually in the legislation, and so you don't have a whole lot of choices. But if you were dealing with something else in a document where there were 10 items, I would challenge you to look and make sure all the items were related and that you didn't actually have 2 lists in one. The famous situation I was just telling you about where the list went into a third page, when I went through and grouped all the list items and figured it out, I had 9 different lists. 9 lists. They were all related to something, but each of the items was not related to each of the other items. As I went through it, I sang to myself, one of these things is not like the other, because the list was so long that after reading 3 or 4 items, I would suddenly discover one that was completely like, what? Where did that come from? And that's when I understood I had to break all these things into multiple lists, not just 2 or 3, multiple lists. Don't let that happen. Don't let that happen. Keep your lists short, keep them with lots of white space, and use them as often as possible. Do, however, avoid having multiple bullet lists immediately following each other. The same thing will happen in the person's brain, that it will all run together into one big master list. In my giant list that turned into 9 lists, those lists ended up getting moved to different points that were more appropriate in the document to make it possible for any user to understand what was going on. And that brings us to the end of our time together, friends. I want you to know that you might not have felt it coming on, but you are different now. You're going to look at the world differently. You're going to look at all documents differently. You're going to look at social media differently. You're going to look at the stuff that pops up on your phone differently. You're going to look at the documents at work very differently. And we know, again, from research that the steps for adults to learn anything involve these 6 steps plus repetition. And repetition is important for all adult brains, more even than children. It usually, some research, I think some of it's been discredited, but some research says it takes 7 times for you to hear or read something before it actually sticks into your long-term memory. I generally think it takes 3 or 4 for you to gain awareness before it sticks in your long-term memory. But today you've already shown awareness and willingness just by showing up in our class today. And hopefully you leave today with 1, maybe 2 things. You can close your laptop, take a little break, and when you re-log in and start working, you can use these things right now today. You can use simple, clear words. You can make simple, clear sentences, and you can put those sentences together, covering only one topic or subject at a time to make simple, clear paragraphs. You can add white space, bullet lists, and you can break up complicated things with tables in a way that you never have before, perhaps. So you've got new understanding. From this point forward, my challenge for you, friends, is practice. The more you practice, changing your habits, identify your defaults on those words and phrases, and practice. You're going to perfect plain language. And then I urge you to please share it with your friends, with your colleagues, and most importantly, with your managers. So we had a very important question earlier during the break, and it has reappeared a few times. What to do about managers who don't want plain language or who change things back from plain language to clogged up bureaucratic language. And this is a question I've had in every one of the classes I have ever taught. Again, I'm sorry, no simple answer. It comes down to this. When you're an employee for any organization, there is a hierarchy and someone is your boss. And we all learn very early in life, we have to do what the boss says and complain about it later. So I would never encourage anyone to break any rules or go head to head with their supervisor to prove a point. But I would encourage you to do just that. Encourage. Please use plain language. Show your boss how it makes things better. And very soon you'll start seeing changes and differences. Also, if you share the simpler words and cluttered phrases document we're going to give you with your bosses, it may help you make your case that you either need plain language training for your group or your department or the whole agency, or that things could be better or different. And with that, I'm going to say just a very simple thank you. It is a delight to teach. It's my favorite thing about everything that I do professionally. And I'm so grateful to American University. I'd like to thank my team, Lam, Brianne, and Jen. Thank you for having me here. Thank you for helping me with all the technology today. If you have a really pressing question, please let me know. Also, you have some resources and some books that may be very helpful for you. But most importantly, I want you all to know that all of my students are always encouraged to keep my email address. It will never change. And you are always welcome to contact me anytime, even 10 years from now. Just remind me, I was in your class, such and such a day, such and such a place. and you have a question or need help. And I will always get back to you as soon as I can, and I will always help you if I can. I encourage you to get in touch with me if you need me. I encourage you to go to plainlanguage.gov, and if you are a manager at any level and you'd like to have one of the trainers, maybe even me, come and teach or teach virtually to your group. We are currently transitioning over to have our plainlanguage.gov classes virtually right now, and we'll be happy to help you. There is usually a little bit of a wait, but free plain language training is available for any federal agency at any time based on the resources available, which usually means volunteer teachers. So thank you. Have a great day. Get that mojito. Look at your simpler words exercise and think about things that we learned today and how your awareness is now on high alert. Have a great afternoon, everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye.